by the very costs required to maintain that second income. Consider the baseline costs of just showing up to work. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported in 2024 that transportation costs the average household $13,318 per year, accounting for 17% of total spending. For many, this isn't a choice, it's a geographical reality. Only 10% of private sector workers had access to commuting subsidies in 2024. Without that support, the cost of the commute fuel, insurance, maintenance, and the occasional toll becomes a mandatory subscription to your own employment. Let's look at a hypothetical household to see how these numbers actually interact. We will call them the Millers. They are a dual-income couple earning a combined $130,000 a year. After taxes, they take home roughly $8,500 a month. Now, the Bureau of Labor Statistics notes that housing remains the largest expense, averaging $26,266 annually, or about 33% of total spending. For the Millers, a modest mortgage or rent in a decent school district likely eats up $2,800 right away. After transportation, they are down to about $4,600. This is the point where most people think they have plenty of money left over. The pressure on this leftover cash is relentless, particularly for those with children. Child Care Aware of America reported that the average annual cost of childcare hit $13,128 in 2024, a 29% increase since 2020. For the Millers, this means another $1,100 a month vanishes. This isn't a fluctuating expense. It is a rigid, recurring cost that must be paid before a single bag of groceries is bought. If the Millers want to maintain their career trajectory, this isn't an optional spend. This leads us to a shift in how we perceive value. When time becomes the scarcest resource, we stop looking at the price of a service and start looking at the friction it removes. The Bank of America Institute noted that childcare inflation was rising at 5.2% year over year in late 2025, which is 1.5 times faster than the overall inflation rate. When the cost of basic survival services outpaces the cost of goods, the household budget enters a state of permanent fragility. It's the 3 different streaming services, the premium version of every app to avoid ads, the bi-weekly house cleaning because there is no time on weekends, and the meal kit delivery because grocery shopping feels like a marathon after a 10-hour workday. None of these are bad choices. In fact, for many, they are rational responses to time poverty. The Levy Economics Institute found in 2025 that roughly 39% of single adults experience significant time poverty, with employed women facing a 9-point gap compared to men. Returning to our household math for the Millers, they started with $8,500. After housing, transport, and childcare, they have $3,500 left. Now subtract a conservative $1,500 for groceries and utilities. They are at $2,000. Once you layer in the second rent-the-gym memberships, the lawn care, the cloud storage, and the semi-regular takeout necessitated by exhaustion, the $2,000 quickly shrinks to $500. This $500 is their actual margin for the entire month. It's what is left for car repairs, dental work, or retirement savings. Of course, this perspective isn't universal, and it's important to acknowledge where this logic might fail. A fair counterargument is that many of these expenses are lifestyle choices disguised as necessities. One could argue that the second rent is simply a lack of discipline, that a family could choose to live in a smaller home, drive older cars, or spend their Sundays meal prepping to avoid delivery fees. There is some truth here. For some, the trap is indeed a gilded cage of their own making. However, this dismisses the reality of the floor in modern society. In many regions, there is no reliable public transit, meaning the car is not a choice. In many career paths, long hours are not an option, but a condition of tenure. Reasonable people disagree on where the line between necessity and luxury actually sits. This depends heavily on your local economy and your specific state of life. A single person in a walkable city has a completely different structural overhead than a family of 4 in a sprawling suburb. This doesn't apply if you have a robust support system such as nearby family who can provide free labor like childcare or home maintenance. But for the vast majority of people moving to where the jobs are, that support system is replaced by a credit card transaction. Another fair point to consider is that these conveniences actually enable higher earning potential. By outsourcing low-value tasks like cleaning or laundry, an individual can theoretically dedicate more time to high-value tasks like professional development or high-stakes projects. In this view, the second rent is an investment. It is a way to leverage capital to buy back time that has a higher ROI elsewhere. While this is a sophisticated way to look at a budget, it only works if the time saved is actually converted into income or genuine well-being. If the time saved is simply funneled back into more work to pay for the services that saved the time in the first place, the investment has failed. The nuance here is that we are often blind to the cumulative nature of these costs. We see a $12 subscription or a $5 delivery fee in isolation. We rarely see them as a unified monthly minimum that has raised our cost of living by 20% without changing our standard of living. It's the difference between a one-time cost and a structural obligation. Once you hire a service, your lifestyle adjusts to include it. So, how do we evaluate this without falling into the trap of moralizing spending? It requires a shift in how we view our accounts. If you were to lose your job tomorrow, how much of your spending could you actually turn off instantly? If the answer is not much because your life is built on a foundation of recurring payments and essential outsourced labor, then your financial risk is much higher than your salary suggests. The goal isn't necessarily to live a life of asceticism or to spend every weekend scrubbing floors to save a few dollars. The goal is to recognize when a convenience has transitioned from a helpful tool into a mandatory tax. The math of 2026 tells a clear story. The middle class isn't just fighting inflation at the grocery store. They are fighting a structural tide that demands more capital to solve the problem of having less time. We have built an economy where the most efficient way to live is often the most expensive to maintain. Understanding this doesn't solve the problem, but it does change the way you look at that next one-click purchase. It's rarely just $15. If this perspective on the structural costs of modern living gave you something to think about, consider subscribing for more observations on the hidden mechanics of the economy. Walking through any major metropolitan center at 5:30 on a Tuesday afternoon feels like watching a high-speed experiment in human endurance. You see it in the frantic pace of a young professional checking their watch while waiting for a rideshare, or the parent scrolling through a grocery delivery app while standing on a crowded train. In 2024, the average American carried just $67 in physical cash, a drop from $81 only a year prior, according to the Atlanta Federal Reserve. We are moving away from tangible currency because we no longer have the time to handle it. We aren't just spending money anymore. We are spending money to reclaim the minutes we lost earning it. The transition from a luxury to a baseline necessity happens slowly. It starts with a single late night at the office, where a $15 delivery fee feels like a fair trade for 30 minutes of rest. But over time, these micro decisions solidify into a permanent architectural feature of a household budget. This isn't about traditional debt or high-interest credit cards. It is a more subtle phenomenon, the emergence of a second rent. This is the collective total of every recurring service, convenience fee, and outsourced domestic task that a modern household requires just to remain functional. To understand how we got here, we have to look at the structural reality of the modern family. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2024, nearly 50% of married couple families are dual income. On paper, 2 salaries should mean more breathing room. In practice, it often creates a time deficit. When both adults are working, the labor that used to be performed within the home cooking, cleaning, childcare, and basic maintenance must now be purchased on the open market. This creates a trap where the second income is often consumed